In this module, we will add a blog feature to the app. The data for the blog will come from an external website that is hosted with WordPress. First, we will create a component that will display each post. After that, we will create the blog component. This will display the posts in the list. Then we will learn about the flat list component. This component is used to host the blog item components and renders the actual list of posts. Then finally, we will add the blog detail component. This will display a single blog post once it is selected from the list. After this module is over, an external blog will be added to the app. As new posts are added to the WordPress site, they will also be displayed in the Global Mantix app. The first thing we will add for the blog is a listing of blog posts. Typically, data from a remote source will be provided by an API set up to return the necessary data. Eventually, this will be provided for our app, but in the meantime, we will use WordPress to provide some sample data. A free WordPress site from WordPress.com provides an API that we can use to grab all the posts. We can then display these posts in our app. Before we add the blog, we first need to navigate to the project in a terminal. We are going to install the React Native Render HTML package. This will allow us to render HTML inside our components. This command will also install it to our project's package.json file. After that, create a file named blog.js in the views folder. First, we will import useState and useEffect from React. Then we import text, view, flatlist, and use window dimensions from React Native. The flat list is the component that we are going to use to display the list of posts. Use window dimensions is a hook that allows you to handle changes to the screen size. We use this to make sure the HTML will display correctly if the user rotates their device. The final import we have is for the render HTML component. After that, we add the blog item component. This is not the main component that we will export so that it can be imported into the app.js file. We could technically add all of the components of our app in a single file. In this case, we are adding this component so it can be displayed by another component. A blog item will be inserted for each post, and all of them will be displayed in a list. First, we initialize the width. This is accomplished with the use window dimensions hook. You will see why we do this in a moment. Then we will add the renderer's props. Since the content in this component will be HTML, we need a way to navigate to the selected post when it is tapped. The item will be wrapped in a view we could use for this, but instead we will override the behavior of the anchor tag. The renderer's props allow us to customize how the anchor responds. The anchor has access to the onPress prop, so we can use that to execute a function when tapped. In this case, we are using the chosePost function. This function will actually be passed in as a prop and will navigate to the selected post. Then we add the variable that will contain the HTML that we are going to render. We will wrap the HTML in backticks. This allows us to insert our expressions directly into the string. We will wrap everything in the anchor tag. We also add some inline styles. Even though this is standard HTML, we can use camel case styles. The render HTML component uses mixed styles. As a result, we can also enter styles in the traditional format for CSS. Text decoration line set to none removes the underline that indicates a link. We change the color to black since the default link color is blue. We also center the contents of this link. Then we add an IMG tag. The source for this image will be passed in as a prop. Then we add the title, which is wrapped in an H1 tag. Then finally, we add the excerpt, which is just a small snippet of the full post. This is already wrapped by a P tag, so we just add it by itself. Next, we add a view component to wrap the item. To avoid having to use a style sheet, we add the styles for the view in line. Since this is a React Native component, we have to add these styles in camel case. We set the bottom border width and color. We also set the border style to solid. After that, we can add the render HTML component. Inside the render HTML component, we need to add the source prop. This is a required prop and specifies the source HTML for this component. Then we add the renderer's props, which customizes the behavior of the anchor tag. And then we add the content width prop that controls the width of the content. This is not required, but I added it to avoid a warning in the console. This width comes from the use window dimensions hook and allows the HTML component to be sized based on the device's screen size. Now that we have added the blog item component, In the next clip, we will add the blog component that will display a listing of the blog posts. Now that we have the blog item component finished, we can add the actual blog component to blog.js. This component will display a listing of the blog posts. Again, we use the navigation prop so we have access to its methods. The first thing we will do on this component is initialize state for the blog loaded variable. This is a Boolean that we will set to false. Then we initialize the blog list variable with an empty array. After that, we will add an async function. An async function is a cleaner way to handle promises. You will see why we use an async function in a moment. In the try statement, we will use the fetch method to grab all the posts from WordPress. Fetch is a networking library that is built into React Native. The fetch method will return a promise, which is why we use the async function. If we wrote the fetch method by chaining in callbacks, we would get a warning in the console. This is because React Native prefers the async await pattern in the useEffect hook. All you need to do is provide a valid endpoint to the fetch method. Then we use await to grab the promise. Await will cause the code to pause while waiting for the response. Once we get the response, we parse it as JSON. After that, we store the list of posts in the blog list state variable. The catch statement is for any errors that are encountered. If there is an error, this will be logged to the console. If the data is retrieved and no errors are encountered, the last thing we will do is set the blog loaded state variable to true. This will allow us to show the component and hide the loading message that is displayed until the data is loaded. After that, we can add the useEffect hook. This time, instead of adding the code in the hook, we will just call the getPosts function. We also add an empty array as the second argument to useEffect. This will cause useEffect to run just one time. Then the last thing we will add is the choseBlog function. This is the function that we will use to navigate to the selected post. The interesting thing about this function is that it will be passed to the blog item as a prop. We need the navigation prop to navigate, but we will be navigating from the blog item component. We could add the useNavigation hook, but we can access the navigation prop indirectly by passing this function as a prop. If you look at the renderer's props above, you will see the chosePost function takes the same argument as the choseBlog function. If we go back to the choseBlog function, we see that the navigate method has an additional argument. This second argument is a route param. The blog ID with the lowercase d is the key that we will use to grab the route param. The blog ID with the capital ID is the value of the route param. This will be the ID of the blog post. Now that we have our functions added, in the next clip, we will get familiar with the flat list and finish the blog component. In this clip, we will finish up the blog.js file. In the return, the first thing we will add is a view component to wrap everything. What this component displays will be based on whether or not the data has been loaded. To accomplish this, we will use conditional rendering. This is shorthand for if the blog loaded state variable is true, then display this. Remember, we set this variable to true once the data is loaded successfully. Since this is an expression, we have to wrap it in curly brackets. After that, we add another view component. We add some padding to the top with an inline style. Then we add the flat list component. The flat list is similar to the scroll view, but should perform much better with long lists of data. This is because the scroll view renders all of its items at once, while the flat list lazy loads its items as they scroll into view. The flat list has a lot of props we can use, but the data and render item are the most important. Data represents the data that will be used to populate the list. This needs to be in a plain array, which is how we have stored the blog posts. The render item is used to render each item in the list. This is where we will use the blog item component. Data and render item are required props. Another prop that is not required but suggested to use is the key extractor. This basically assigns a unique key to each item. This allows React to track items for reordering. Since we have access to the post ID, which is unique, we can use this for the key extractor. Back in the blog.js file, we will first add the data prop to the flat list. The data prop is using the blog list state variable, which we know contains an array. Then we add the key extractor prop. The item object we pass in gives us access to each blog post in the list. Using this, we can extract the post ID. We use the toString method to parse the ID, which is returned as JSON. Nothing will happen if we don't add the key extractor, so feel free to leave this prop out. After that, we add the render item prop. This is basically a function that passes the item object for each blog post to the component that we will use for each item. The component we created for this is the blog item. We of course need to add some props. The ID prop uses the blog post ID. The title will use the post title. The image source will use the featured image. And the excerpt prop will use the excerpt from the post. All of these props will get their data from what is returned from WordPress. The last prop we will add will not come from WordPress, and instead will allow the blog item to navigate to the selected page. The choose blog function we added will navigate to the selected route. It has access to the navigation prop because it will eventually be added to routing. The blog item does not have this prop, but can use this function as a prop. Using the choose post prop as a function allows the blog item to initiate navigation to another route. After that, we add another conditional. This will match when the blog loaded state is false. If the blog loading state is false, that means the data has not loaded yet. In that case, we will display a loading message. We use a view component to wrap a text component. The view component has an inline style that applies some padding to the top. The last thing we need to do in this file is export the blog component. After that, save your project. Now that the blog component is done, in the next clip, we will add the blog detail page. In this clip, we will add the blog detail page. The listing of blog posts only shows the title and the excerpt. In order to read a full blog post, the user needs to tap it. Add a file named blogdetail.js in the views folder. First, we import useState and useEffect from React. After that, we import text, view, image, scroll view, and use window dimensions from React Native. Then the last import we add will be for the render HTML component. After that, we add the blog detail component. This time we pass the route prop along with the navigation prop. This prop is also available to components that are included in routing. You will see why we need this in a moment. Then we initialize the post loaded state variable with the Boolean set to false. This will track the status of the blog post being loaded. Following that, we initialize the post title state variable. This is initialized with an empty string and uses the set post title function to update it. We will also initialize the post image state variable, the post content state variable, and the post ID state variable. These will all be initialized with an empty string. After that, we will capture the width of the screen to use with the render HTML component. The last thing we will do is grab the selected post ID from the route params. This is why we added the route prop, which gives us access to the params that we passed. Remember, the navigate method that navigates to this page passes the ID of the selected post. Here we extract this ID to use with the fetch method. Next, we will add the function that will grab an individual post. This will be similar to the getPost function that we added to the blog page. The first thing we will do is use fetch. This fetch request appends the blog ID to the request. We do this using the variable we captured from the route params. The requests we used on the blog page return all of the posts. By adding the ID, we will only return the selected post. Also notice that this request is wrapped in backticks and not single quotes. This allows us to use variables in line provided they are wrapped in curly brackets and preceded by a $sign. Then we parse the response as JSON. Then we will use the post object from the response to set the post title, the post image, the post content, and the post ID. These are, of course, the functions that we use to update our state variables. After that, we will account for any errors. Once the request is finished, we will set the post loaded state to true. The useEffect hook uses the getPost function. Again, note that we use an empty array as the second argument, which causes useEffect to run just once. After that, we add a variable called blog tag styles. We're going to use this to apply styles to a specific tag in the rendered HTML. In this case, we are going to hide any images. This is because the content includes an image, but we lose some control over the way this image is rendered. Specifically, the image will appear beneath the title. This will hide any images included in the content of the post. Then we will add a variable called blog class styles. This lets us create styles that we can pass to the rendered HTML by using the corresponding class name. First, we add some styles for the title. We use the old CSS margin trick of setting automatic margins to center an element. The render HTML component allows us to use mixed styles, so we can use camel case. I do this to remain consistent with the way React Native styles are defined. Then we add equal margins on the left and right for the content, and automatic margins and some padding on the bottom for the back button. After that, we add the HTML that we will use as the source. This HTML is also wrapped in backticks and not single quotes. First, we add a div that will wrap the post title. We have applied the BL title class to the div. Then we add another div that will wrap the post content. This div uses the BL content class. The final thing we will add is the div that contains a link that says go back. The href does not matter as we are going to override the default link behavior again. Now that we have added the HTML source, in the next clip we will finish the blog detail component. In this clip, we will finish the blog detail page. Before we add the return, we will again use the renderer's props. As we did before, we will use this to respond to the onPress event when an anchor element is tapped. In this case, we will navigate to the blog page, in essence going back. The first thing we will add to the return is a view component that will wrap everything. We use an inline style that adds some padding to the top. We will use conditional rendering like we did with the blog page. When the post-loaded state variable is true, this is what will be rendered. We use a scroll view to wrap the blog post. This allows all the text to be viewed if it extends further than the dimensions of the viewport. Since we disabled the inline image of our post, we will instead use the React Native image component. We use some inline styles to set the height and width of the image. Then in the source, we use the URI, which is what we use for remote images. The post feature image does not contain HTML and is a URL to the image. As a result, we can use it with the image component. Underneath the image, we will add the render HTML component. In the source prop, we will use the post details variable. Then we add the blog tag styles using the tag styles prop. This prop allows you to target a specific HTML tag. This is how we disable the image being returned in the content. After that, we add the blog class styles using the classes styles prop. This allows us to apply the blog class styles by using these classes in our HTML. After that, we add the renderer's props, which is how we override the behavior of the anchor tag. Then finally, we use the content width prop to set the size of the HTML content according to the width of the screen. After that, we can add the loading message that will display before the data has loaded. We add some padding to the top and align the items to the center. This will be rendered as long as the post-loaded state variable is false. The last thing we need to do is export the blog detail component. After that, save your project. Now that the blog detail page is finished, in the next clip, we will add the blog feature to the app. Now that we have created the components we need for the blog feature, we can add it to the app. First, let's go to the app.js file. First, we need to import the blog component and the blog detail component from the view folder. Then we can add the screen for the blog page. The name of the route will be blog. The component that will be used for this route is the blog component. In this case, we will keep the default header. This is to provide a back button to navigate back to the home page. Since we have the default header, we add a title. Then we can add the screen for the blog detail page. The name of the route will be blog detail. The component that will be loaded for this route is the blog detail component. We added a back button to this component, so we don't need the header's back button. As a result, we can disable the header for this route. Then the last thing we need to do is make a change to our menu. Go to the menu.js file. In the button for the blog, make sure the navigate method uses the blog route. After that, save your project. Now that we have added the blog feature, in the next clip, we will demo the blog. In this clip, we will demo the app and look at the blog. First, we will navigate to the blog component. Then we will change the styles we applied to the blog component so we can understand what these styles do. After that, we will select the blog post so we can navigate to the blog detail page. Then we will change some of the styles applied to the blog detail component to see what effect they have. The first thing we need to do is launch Android Studio. Once it is up, start the Virtual Device Manager. From there, we can launch the emulator. When the emulator is up, navigate to the project folder in the terminal. Then run the React Native Start command. This will start the Metro bundler. Leave this running and open a second terminal window. Then use the Run Android command. After a moment, the app should launch on the emulator. When the app starts up, tap the blog link in the menu. This should take you to the blog. We can scroll up and down the list of posts. The header displays the back arrow and the title we added. Before we select the blog post, I will remove some of the styles that we added. This will give you a better idea of the effect they have. I will be adding these styles back so you don't need to change your project. I will remove all the styles that we applied to the anchor tag that we used in the HTML for the blog component. The content looks much different now. Since this is a link, the title is underlined. Also, the default color of the text in the link is blue. Also, by default, the text is not center aligned. Once we add these styles back, you can really see the effect that these styles had in the way the blog listing is presented. Now let's select the blog post. We should then navigate to the blog detail page for that post. Now, instead of the excerpt, we will have the full content of the post. If there is more text than can be displayed on the screen, then we will be able to scroll up and down. If we scroll up, we can see the back button. If we tap the button, we should navigate back to the blog page. Back at the blog page, choose another post to navigate to. If we go back to the blog detail.js file in our text editor, we can remove the tag styles and classes styles props from the render HTML component. When we do that, a second image appears in the middle of the content. This is what we disabled by setting the display to none in the blog tag styles. All the text that appears on the page is now flush with the left edge of the screen. If we add the props back, the blog detail component appears how it's supposed to. Coming up in the next module, we will add the quiz feature to the app.